If I ever wondered why I was tired, all I had to do was listen to that continuous retinue of things. As my family would have said, "Where is your mother?" And the answer was often, "She is president of what's happening now." So, thank you. All those of you who have children know that they have a way of putting you in your place, both hopefully, helpfully, and sometimes a little bit challenging. It's my honor and pleasure to be here today. I have to tell you, and congratulations to all those of you who made this festival possible. It is truly remarkable, and I have been to more than my number of events like this. But not only is this one of the most well-organized, but the most thoughtful, and in some ways the most courageous. During the time that we have been here, we have faced many of the issues of the day that make our day, for us, a challenging and I think perhaps a nervous time. My reflections today are reflections on courage. And it is really on courage that is life-changing. We are, I think, in a time when courage marked by compassion is not just a good idea, but it is a necessity for our very survival. Odd as it may seem, I have chosen to make the point by telling you a story, a true story, and a very old story in my life. I believe that it illustrates what is the necessary personality and commitments that one must have in a time that needs courage and in a time that is, in fact, what I think, a dangerous time. First of all, let me tell you, something happens to you when you get to be a certain age. And if you've noticed, everyone who's in their 80s wants to tell you how old they are. We spend all these years with the makeup and all, not telling anyone how old you are. And then you come to be, as I will be in November, 85 years old, and you're proud of every year. It wasn't until I began to think about what to say today that I realized that I wanted to go back to my time with Dr. King. But then when I looked at the calendar, and I realized that was 51 years ago. It seems now almost impossible it was that long ago. But it was 1965. I was living in Cleveland, Ohio. I was a young mother with 3, to call them lively children would be an understatement, very busy children, and a husband who was a young lawyer. A young and brilliant pastor had come to our church. Now, I will have to confess to you that this pastor's daughter is in the congregation today with us, and so she can call me on it if I'm not correct on this. But he was one who changed hearts. He said to me one day with a very nice way of putting it, but he said, "You're one of the most committed people that I've ever met, and the content is equally screwed up." And he said, "I intend to give content to this commitment." And that is actually what happened. And so we come to the story of the day. I was living in Shaker Heights, Ohio. It was a city that was struggling with racial justice. It was a very white place of very well-to-do people trying to wrestle with what it meant for the city to change its racial character. Carl Stokes was getting ready to run for the mayor of Cleveland. He was to become the first African-American mayor of a major American city. The idea challenged Martin Luther King, and he came to Cleveland, and he was with us day after day as we began to work with the churches and the synagogues and the mosques to prepare the city for the election of Carl Stokes. One night, Dr. King said, those of you who didn't ever know him, and I still remember when my granddaughter came home one day and said to her mother, "We're studying Martin Luther King." And she said, "Would you help me?" And she said, "Don't ask me, call your grandmother." She knew him. And my granddaughter, who was 6 years old, said, "No." She said, "He was in history." And, you know, I realized for the first time in my life that that is how that generation, and for those of you who sit here from that generation, that the privilege to have known Dr. King, to have walked with him, and to have talked with him is an enormous privilege. And for many, that they did come after he already was gone. And so the night came when we were at a regular meeting. Every week we met with people who were working on the election for our city. And this night, Dr. King, who was very funny, actually, he had a wonderful sense of humor, and I could tell by the look on his face he was going to say something that was going to make us nervous. And he said, "You know, I love what you're doing, but I have never in my life been asked to be in a white church in this city. I've been here almost a year." Well, I was young and eager and really didn't know a lot. I learned a lot in this process, believe me. And so I said to him, "We have a wonderful young minister, and he's very good on racial justice. He talks about it, he challenges the congregation, and I would love to have you. I'm sure our church would welcome you." Wrong. This was the beginning of my salvation. It was the beginning of my education. It was a time of enormous sadness. No, the church did not all want to welcome him. So badly did they not want to welcome him that they moved the pews out of the sanctuary, and because they suddenly had enough money to redecorate the sanctuary. And then said, "Well, we can't have Dr. King because we wouldn't want to have him without a proper setting in which for him to speak." It got more and more difficult and more painful. However, there was a group of people, very strong, not necessarily what one would have considered the best people in the congregation or perhaps the most involved. But they said, "No, we will have Dr. King." And being a disciple of Christ Church, we took a vote. And the congregation overwhelmingly, with some very strong exceptions, voted that he should come. The powers that be finally agreed that he could come, but he would have to speak outside, not inside the congregation. And so we said, fine. And I talked to Dr. King, and he said, "No problem, young lady, I can do that." And he came, and the day that he arrived, there were demonstrators outside, people carrying their flags upside down with swastikas on their arms. But he was not challenged by this. He walked out onto that portico, and there were 3,000 plus people waiting to hear him. Thank you. Never could that many people have gotten into that sanctuary. It was my first encounter with bigotry, my own personal encounter. I became unasked to parties because I might bring up the subject, which they didn't wish to have discussed. But as always, truth won, and courage emerged, and the invitation was honored. And no one in that congregation will ever forget the day that Dr. King came. Today, there hangs on the back door of the congregation a plaque a beautiful plaque that says, on such and such a day in this year, Dr. Martin Luther King spoke from these steps under the ministry of Albert M. Pennybacker. And he told us, and they go on to quote what his speech was. And so he has become the sacred memory of that congregation. And it is today an integrated congregation. Yes, there were conditions, and yes, it was difficult. And on the night before his visit, there were police that had to stay in our home overnight. My 3 children, of course, thought this was very exciting. I mean, they were not particularly concerned about it because they could tell all their friends this, but they do remember that it had to be. The day came, and Dr. King was with us, and it is a day that we will not forget. Today, we welcome and we remember Dr. King and all of the things that he has taught us. The rest of the story, the gift and the cost, are now regularly reported by members of that congregation. As you probably know, Carl Stokes did become the first mayor of Cleveland, first African mayor of Cleveland. Today, many have walked in his footsteps. Perhaps one lighthearted story would help at this point. I'm watching the time. And my daughter, we went to lobby for Carl Stokes, went door to door, and we were in neighborhoods where people were not excited about his becoming the mayor. And my daughter, who was with me, said at the time, she was 11 years old, and she said, you know, why does he want to be mayor? It's so difficult. This is such an ugly thing that's happening here. 10 years later, not 10, more, 20-some years later, this same young woman called me one night and said, Mother, I need you to be home, and I need you to be here on Saturday, and I need you to be with me when I announce that I'm going to run for mayor of Cleveland. And she did become, and to this day, is the first and only woman mayor of the city of Cleveland. Dr. King changed our lives. He changed the lives of that congregation. He changed the lives of many whose names we will never know and whose faces we will never see. But I think what it presents to us, the bravery that was his, the sacrifice that he took, his gift to us of nonviolence, which we talk about today, but when having watched it with someone like Dr. King, we say very carefully that we believe in nonviolence. If you lived with and watched Dr. King, you had to know that that commitment was a commitment of high cost. And so perhaps, as we gather here in this festival of faith, and I like the fact that it is said to be of faiths with an S on it, so that we are a festival of many faiths. So love remains costly. So to all who live under the pressure of prejudice, for those who have to live that life, to all of you, we say our hearts go out, but more importantly, our commitment is yours. We will walk with you. We especially say that today to those who are with us who are of the Muslim faith. We walk with you, we want to be with you, and perhaps the best ending I could give you is the famous poem that goes like this. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Thank you.